Hi there, my name is Tracy Beekers, and I'm here to help you prepare for your IELTS exam. I know that it's pretty daunting, and you've seen horror stories where people have had to do their exam 5, 6 times, and it's all this one step that you need in your immigration dream. But with a lot of practice, you can get there. And today we are going to focus on part one of the academic writing component. Let's begin. I know that it was maybe a bit easier for me to score band 9 in this exam because I am an English teacher, but don't get it wrong. I spent many hours researching how to write these pieces correctly, and I also spent many hours practicing. So, from my practice and my research, I came to this conclusion for part one. It's not like an essay that you would usually write, as in it doesn't have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. It is rather like a report, and I imagine it as I have to explain what the graph or the chart or the table is showing, what information it's showing, as if I have to explain it to someone over the phone. So, my first step is make sure that you understand that question and you take note of all the key words. Also, be careful it does not give a second part of the question. Then analyze the chart that you've been given or the table or the graph, and it's never difficult. It's a very simple chart that you have to read, and just take note of some of the key features, especially the highest points, the lowest points, strange fluctuations, and things like that. Just take note of them. Take that time, it's very important. Then you want to write your first paragraph and basically just rephrase the question. That's all you need to do. And a way that you can start is this graph or chart or table, or whatever it is, illustrates and then just rephrase the question. Then you move on to the next paragraph. And this is an overview of what the chart or the table or the graph is showing. So, from the notes that you took, just give a very broad description of the general trends that you see. And I always started with the word overall. And they don't get bored of this format because that is what they're looking at. Then you have the body paragraphs, and this is where you explain in detail what is being observed in the chart or the table or the graph or whatever it is. Really detail the movements, the highs and the lows, give specific figures as well. And hopefully, there's a chance for you to contrast. And what I would do there is talk about one part of the graph or the data in one paragraph so that you can write another paragraph and use something that the examiners love. And those are linking devices. On the other hand, however, in contrast. So you can do that for 2 or 3 paragraphs. And then you do not need a concluding paragraph at all because, as I said, this is more of a report than a formal essay. I pulled this question straight off IELTS.org. Thank you very much to them. And as you can see, this is a very good example of what to expect in part one. And let's go ahead with the first step. To make sure you understand the question, read it and highlight those key bits of information. Then analyze the graph and take note of data that really stands out to you. So make sure you understand it and then take notes. Always take your time to do 2 minutes of planning. just to give your writing some structure. The keywords that I took from the question were we are looking at both radio and television audiences. The date 1992 is very important. And another thing that's important is these are UK audiences over 4 years old. So this is what I have taken from the question. And it says summarize the information, select and report the main features, and make comparisons. So they really do want you to make comparisons as well in your answer. I've marked a few of the key parts of the data in the graph. So there are definite peaks for both, which is good for my comparison. And also, you can see overall more people tune into television than they do to radio, and it's very dependent on the time of day. So you can definitely see more people in the morning are tuning into the radio, and in the evening, more people are tuning into television. So this only took me 2 to 5 minutes, and by making these observations, it's going to make the writing much easier. Here are a few tips before we start writing our piece for part one. I have already touched on explain the data. Also, I've spoken about it's more like a report. I've also emphasized the importance of linking devices between your paragraphs. What we do need to think about is we need to use academic vocabulary. This doesn't mean you have to squish big words in to sound impressive. You just need to study some good alternatives for everyday words, especially that you would use in part one, and find the stronger alternatives. So instead of saying show, you can say demonstrate. You don't need to use all these fancy words. We don't know what they mean. It's not necessary. However, we do need to elevate our vocabulary just a little bit. Also important is we need to use an academic style because this is academic writing. What that means is do not use contractions. Contractions are when you shorten two words, like do not becomes don't, cannot becomes can't. We are not allowed to do this in academic writing, so please avoid those contractions. Also, do not use the words I and you. Stick to third person, which is he, she, it, and they. Also, try to keep your tense in present tense as far as you can as well, because switching tenses like present, past, future, for example, is not very good. It doesn't matter if they are in different sentences or different paragraphs, but not in the same sentence. You will get heavily penalized for that. Okay, let's write our first paragraph. All you need to do is rephrase that question with all of the keywords. And you don't have to start like this, but a good way to start would be by saying the graph illustrates. My example is the graph illustrates audience engagement with radio and television among people aged over 4 in the United Kingdom in 1992 over a 24-hour period. I've rephrased the question and I've given all the parameters of the graph in my first paragraph. Now we move on to the second paragraph, which is the overview paragraph. So we just talk about the overall trends that we see. We don't give specific figures at all. It's just, what is this graph about? Here's an overview. So here is my example. I always start with overall because it's an overview. Overall, the graph reveals distinct peak periods of audience engagement and clearly indicates that television is the dominant broadcast medium. While radio attracts higher audience in the morning, television overwhelmingly dominates during the evening hours. As you can see, instead of saying the graph shows, I chose an academic word, reveals. I also added overwhelmingly instead of saying something like many more people watch television. And instead of saying that, I also used the word dominate, which is a very nice, strong academic word. Now I'm moving on to the body paragraphs, which is really going into detail about the data. And remember, it asked us not only to summarize it, but to compare and contrast as well. But you will see I've explained radio, then I explained television, and then I explain them together to compare and contrast them. So as you can see in this paragraph, I have given specific figures on the X and Y axes, the times and the percentages in my answer. Radio listenership rises from approximately 6 a.m. and reaches a peak at around 8 a.m., with just under 30% of the population tuning in. Thereafter, the figure declines steadily throughout the day, falling to almost zero by 3 a.m., after which it begins to increase gradually once again. Succinct, to the point. And did you see I added a little linking device within my paragraph thereafter? And that is what examiners really want to see. I didn't shove big words in there. It's very straightforward, but I've used very elevated language and I've been very careful about my style. Now I do exactly the same thing for the data about the television audiences. And look up for my linking device because they love this, the examiners. If you look at how they mark your writing, that is definitely one of the things that they're looking for. Television audiences, by contrast, there's my linking device, account for up to 8% in the early morning, followed by a sharp decline at around 11 a.m. However, another linking device, viewership then rises steadily, reaching a peak of just under 50% of the population at approximately 8 p.m. This level remains stable until 9 p.m. before dropping sharply to nearly zero by 3 a.m. Very straightforward, very matter-of-fact tone and academic style again. But we have to contrast them and compare them as well because that was part of the question. And that is why I decided to add a third paragraph, which we'll look at next. Here is my final paragraph. So I start with that linking device, furthermore. And here I'm going to compare and contrast the television and the radio audiences. Furthermore, a clear inverse relationship can be observed between radio and television engagement. When radio audiences peak in the morning, television viewership remains relatively low. Conversely, another linking device, when television reaches its highest level in the evening, radio listenership falls to approximately 8%. Notably, both media reach their lowest levels of engagement simultaneously at around 3 a.m. You might feel the desire for a bit of conjecture here by saying that's when most people would be asleep. We do not need that. We do not want that at all. We just want you to explain the graph as if we needed the information and we couldn't see the graph ourselves. It sounds like it's a formula and they don't want your writing to be formulaic, but they do. They have a rubric, the markers that they need to use, and a checklist. Are there linking devices? Is the style correct? Etc. So, although it seems formulaic, like a formula, this is what they are looking for in part one. Thank you so much for joining me for my lesson today on part one of academic writing for IELTS. And I hope that you feel more confident, but I want you to realize that you need to practice. I've given you the tool and an example. So you've got a formula for success. Put this information here, do this when, use this style. Don't forget your linking devices. I've given you that information. Now it's up to you to do the practice. If you are struggling, I do offer one-on-one tutoring, and you can visit my website. Just look for Penny Lane English Studio. Have a wonderful day and good luck with that exam. Bye.